It's not because they're confident, irresistible, or living some untamed fantasy life. It's because something far deeper is missing within them. Most people assume narcissists are driven by pleasure, but Carl Jung perceived something much more disturbing, a fragile self that relies on constant external proof just to stay intact. In this video, you'll understand why attention feels like oxygen to them, why real intimacy quietly frightens them, and why anyone, yes, absolutely anyone, can become a tool to keep their false self alive for one more fleeting moment. By the end, you'll recognize narcissistic behavior in a way you can't unsee, and it may clarify patterns you've noticed in people you trusted, loved, or never fully understood. Stay with me until the final insight because it connects everything together. And if this already resonates, subscribe so you don't miss what follows. I'm also curious. Leave a comment if this reminded you of someone specific or if it made you see yourself in a new light. Carl Jung believed that every human being develops a persona, a social mask crafted to help us function in society, gain approval, and feel accepted. In psychologically healthy individuals, this mask is flexible. We understand when we are performing a role and when we are expressing our genuine selves. But for a narcissist, the persona is not merely a mask, it becomes their entire identity. They cling to it because without it, they feel exposed, diminished, and deeply inadequate. This is where sexual behavior takes on a psychological meaning that most people misinterpret. For the narcissist, sex is not primarily about pleasure, closeness, or emotional bonding. It becomes one of the quickest and most efficient ways to reinforce the mask they depend on for psychological survival. Each encounter silently answers the question that quietly torments them. Am I still desirable? Am I still powerful? Do I still matter? Jung warned that when a person over-identifies with a persona, they lose contact with their authentic core. The narcissist exists in this state almost continuously. Their sense of worth is not generated from within. It must be reflected back to them by others. Sex offers instant feedback. It is direct, physical, and emotionally charged, making it a perfect mirror for the persona. When someone desires them, the narcissist feels temporarily complete. The mask illuminates and whispers, "You are chosen." But that sensation is unstable. It fades rapidly, which is why the behavior often repeats itself. The person involved is not truly seen as an individual with feelings, boundaries, or depth. They are experienced as a reflection, a surface that confirms the image the narcissist is desperate to preserve. This is why narcissists may appear to sleep with almost anyone. The specific individual matters far less than the validation they provide. Attraction becomes secondary to affirmation. If the persona is validated, the role has been successfully performed. Jung might say the narcissist is trapped in a theatrical existence, constantly acting yet never resting in authenticity. Sex becomes a stage where the narcissist can feel admired without having to reveal anything vulnerable or real. True intimacy requires openness, and openness threatens the persona. It risks exposing the insecurity hidden beneath the mask, so it is carefully avoided. Instead, the narcissist chooses encounters that confirm control without demanding emotional presence. Over time, this forms a compulsive cycle. The narcissist is not chasing pleasure. They are pursuing reassurance. Each encounter reassures them that the persona still functions, that they can still evoke desire and attention, yet this reassurance never endures. Jung described this as a psychological imbalance in which the outer image grows stronger, while the inner self grows weaker. The more the narcissist depends on external affirmation, the more hollow they feel when it disappears. Sex temporarily fills that void, but only in the way noise briefly fills silence, loud but without meaning. What makes this pattern especially harmful is that the narcissist often believes their own performance. They may genuinely view themselves as confident, magnetic, or emotionally detached, while unconsciously being driven by a fear of worthlessness. Jung emphasized that whatever we refuse to confront within ourselves will influence our behavior from behind the curtain. In this case, the unacknowledged fear of insignificance fuels the relentless need to be desired. Anyone who confirms the persona becomes useful. Anyone who challenges it becomes threatening. From the outside, this behavior can appear daring, charming, or even enviable, but psychologically, it reveals a fragile structure held together by constant approval. The narcissist does not ask, "Who is this person?" They ask, "What does this person make me feel about myself?" Sex becomes a transaction between the persona and its audience, not a meeting of two authentic selves. Jung believed healing begins when a person separates from the mask and confronts what lies underneath it. Until that occurs, the narcissist remains dependent on others to uphold an identity that cannot sustain itself alone. In this sense, sleeping with almost anyone is not freedom or confidence. It is the silent effort of maintaining a mask that never truly feels secure. For a narcissist, validation is not a luxury or a simple preference. It operates like psychological oxygen. Without it, their sense of self begins to crumble. Carl Jung observed that when a person fails to develop a stable inner foundation, they become reliant on the external world to tell them who they are. This dependency produces a fragile form of self-esteem, one that cannot regulate itself internally and must be constantly nourished by attention, admiration, and approval. In this condition, sex becomes far more than a physical or emotional act. It becomes evidence. It becomes confirmation that the narcissist still has value, still has influence, still exists in a way that feels meaningful. The moment someone desires them, even briefly, the inner anxiety softens. For that moment, they feel real and substantial. Because this self-esteem is externally powered, the source matters less than the supply. The narcissist is not primarily seeking emotional intimacy or shared experience. They are seeking affirmation. Sex offers one of the most intense and immediate forms of validation available because it combines desire, vulnerability, and focused attention all at once. To the narcissist, being wanted sexually translates into a simple internal message: "I am worthy." This is why the connection itself is often shallow or temporary. The purpose was never to build something enduring. The purpose was to extract reassurance and stabilize the ego's balance. Once that reassurance fades, the emptiness returns and the search resumes. Jung would describe this behavior as compensatory. When the inner world feels fragile, the individual compensates by strengthening the outer image. The narcissist does not feel secure in who they are, so they look for others to reflect an image back to them that appears powerful and admirable. In this dynamic, people become mirrors rather than partners. Their role is not to be understood but to admire. Their value lies in what they reflect, not in who they are as individuals. This is why almost anyone willing can become enough. Willingness signals the availability of validation, and validation is the true object of desire. This dynamic also explains why narcissistic sexual behavior can feel impersonal, even when it appears intense or captivating. The narcissist may seem focused, passionate, or attentive in the moment, but their attention is ultimately directed inward. They are monitoring how they are being perceived, how strongly they are being desired, how effectively they are sustaining the image they rely on. Genuine connection requires mutual presence and curiosity. Validation seeking requires performance. Sex becomes a stage where the narcissist receives applause in the form of desire. Once the applause fades, the performance concludes. Over time, this dependence on external validation creates a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. The more the narcissist uses sex to regulate their self-esteem, the less capable they become of feeling grounded without it. Jung warned that when a person lives solely through reflection, they lose access to their authentic center. The narcissist becomes progressively dependent on others to feel alive, while simultaneously feeling more disconnected after each encounter. What should nourish them leaves them emptier, because it never addresses the core insecurity driving the behavior. This pattern can be deeply confusing for those involved with narcissists. Partners may feel used, interchangeable, or unseen, sensing that something essential was absent despite physical closeness. That absence is the lack of true mutuality. The narcissist was not relating, they were regulating. Sex was used to stabilize an unstable identity, not to share intimacy. From the narcissist's perspective, this is often unconscious. They may genuinely believe they are pursuing desire or independence, while in reality, they are avoiding the painful work of developing inner worth. Jung believed that true psychological strength comes from integrating the inner self, not inflating the outer image. Until that integration occurs, the narcissist remains dependent on mirrors to feel whole. Anyone who provides admiration becomes valuable, and anyone who withholds it becomes irrelevant or threatening. In this light, sleeping with almost anyone is not about excessive desire or a lack of standards. It is about sustaining a fragile identity that cannot survive without constant reflection. It is about maintaining a persona that demands applause to remain standing. And as long as the mask remains fused to the self, the search for validation will continue, intense, repetitive, and ultimately unsatisfying, because no external encounter can permanently repair an inner emptiness that has never truly been faced. It is about survival within a psychological system that has no internal source of reassurance. Validation keeps the structure operating, but it never repairs it. The narcissist continues to breathe through other people, never discovering how to breathe independently. Carl Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we refuse to confront do not simply disappear. Instead, they sink into the unconscious and begin influencing our behavior from behind the curtain. He called this hidden dimension the shadow. The shadow holds traits, emotions, and fears that feel too uncomfortable or threatening to accept, such as insecurity, shame, and feelings of inadequacy. For narcissists, the shadow becomes especially powerful because their entire psychological framework is organized around avoiding these painful inner experiences. Rather than turning inward and examining their weaknesses, they invest nearly all their energy in defending an inflated image of strength and superiority. But the shadow does not remain quiet. It searches for expression through impulsive actions. One of the most common outlets becomes sexual behavior. Narcissists avoid deep self-reflection because it threatens to expose what they fear most: the possibility that they are not as exceptional, powerful, or admirable as they present themselves to be. Jung believed that when reflection is avoided, unconscious forces begin to take control. In the narcissist's case, the shadow pushes forward in ways that feel compulsive rather than deliberate. Sexual impulsivity becomes a strategy to escape uncomfortable inner states. Instead of sitting with insecurity or self-doubt, the narcissist acts. Desire, pursuit, and conquest drown out the quiet voice of shame that lingers beneath the persona. Each encounter provides temporary relief, as if the shadow has been silenced, but in truth, it has only been distracted. This is why narcissistic sexual behavior can feel hurried, careless, or detached from emotional meaning. It is driven less by conscious desire and more by unconscious pressure. Jung described this condition as being possessed by the shadow, where behavior feels automatic and insufficiently examined. The narcissist may tell themselves they are simply following attraction or embracing freedom. Yet the deeper motive is avoidance. Sex becomes a way to outrun inner emptiness. The more the narcissist refuses to acknowledge their insecurity, the louder it grows, demanding expression through action rather than insight. Indiscriminate sexual choices often reflect this internal turbulence. When the shadow takes control, discernment weakens. The narcissist is not thoughtfully selecting partners based on compatibility or genuine connection. They are responding to an internal urgency that seeks immediate relief. Anyone who offers attention or desire can temporarily soothe the unconscious anxiety simmering beneath the surface. Jung emphasized that whatever remains unconscious will be experienced as fate. In this way, the narcissist feels driven, pulled, or compelled without fully understanding why the same patterns repeat again and again. The repetition feels inevitable because the true source remains unexamined. The shadow also contains deep shame, and shame cannot tolerate stillness. It demands distraction. Sexual encounters provide intensity, stimulation, and external focus, all of which prevent the narcissist from sitting alone with their thoughts. But because the behavior is rooted in repression, it never resolves the underlying conflict. After the encounter ends, the shame resurfaces, often stronger than before. This creates a cycle in which impulsive behavior becomes the primary coping mechanism. The narcissist learns to act instead of feel, to pursue instead of reflect. From the outside, this pattern may appear bold or fearless, but psychologically it reveals a lack of inner integration. Jung believed that maturity arises from acknowledging the shadow and taking responsibility for it. The narcissist moves in the opposite direction. They project the shadow outward, using other people as objects to manage their internal discomfort. Individuals become tools for emotional regulation rather than partners for connection. This is rarely done with conscious cruelty, but out of unconscious necessity. The narcissist is propelled by forces they refuse to recognize. Until the shadow is confronted, it continues directing the behavior. Sexual impulsivity is not evidence of liberation. It is evidence of inner fragmentation. The narcissist remains divided between the ideal image they present and the insecurity they suppress. Jung believed that healing begins when a person turns toward what they fear within themselves. Without that inward turn, the narcissist remains trapped in repetition, confusing impulse with choice and intensity with meaning. In this way, indiscriminate sexual behavior is not an expression of authentic desire, but a symptom of an unresolved inner struggle being enacted in the external world. For many narcissists, sex is far less about attraction or emotional longing and far more about power. Carl Jung understood power not merely as an external force, but as a psychological state rooted in how secure a person feels internally. When someone feels inwardly stable, they do not need to dominate others to feel significant. Narcissists, however, often carry a profound sense of inner powerlessness that they work tirelessly to conceal. This hidden fragility generates an intense need to feel in control, admired, and superior. Sex becomes one of the quickest ways to simulate that control. It offers a clear, tangible outcome that can be interpreted as success. Someone desired me. I chose them. I had influence. Within this framework, attraction becomes secondary. What matters is not who the other person truly is, but what the encounter proves about the narcissist's power. Jung believed that when a person lacks inner authority, they seek external forms of dominance to compensate. Narcissists struggle to feel grounded in their own worth, so they pursue situations where they can feel superior, selected, or intensely desired. Sexual encounters provide this illusion rapidly. Each new partner reinforces a fantasy of control that whispers, "I can have whoever I want." This belief temporarily conceals the deeper fear, the fear of being insignificant, replaceable, or unseen. The more fragile the inner self feels, the stronger the urge becomes to assert power externally. Sex becomes a method of feeling in charge of something when the inner world feels unstable and uncertain. This dynamic explains why narcissists may appear to lower standards or behave indiscriminately. The specific individual matters less than the result. The goal is not emotional intimacy or mutual passion, but confirmation of dominance. If someone responds positively, the illusion remains intact. If they resist, the narcissist may feel wounded or enraged because the fantasy of control has been threatened. Jung would describe this as ego inflation constructed on unstable foundations. The narcissist's sense of power depends on constant reinforcement because it is not rooted in self-knowledge or genuine inner confidence. Sex also establishes a clear hierarchy. One person pursues, the other responds. One person feels chosen, the other grants validation. For narcissists, being the desired one restores a sense of superiority that temporarily soothes internal weakness. This is why sex can feel transactional rather than relational. The narcissist is not asking, "Do we truly connect?" They are asking, "Do I still have power?" When the answer feels affirmative, the encounter has fulfilled its purpose. When that sensation fades, the need resurfaces. Jung warned that compensating for inner powerlessness through external dominance produces dependency rather than real strength. The narcissist becomes ensnared in a cycle where control must be continually demonstrated. Each encounter subtly raises the threshold because the relief it brings is short-lived. Over time, the behavior may intensify, not because desire expands, but because the underlying insecurity deepens. What once felt empowering gradually feels hollow, yet the pattern persists because no alternative method of regulation has been developed. From the outside, this conduct may be mistaken for confidence or sexual liberation. In truth, it often signals a deficit of inner autonomy. True power, in Jung's understanding, arises from self-awareness and integration, not conquest. The narcissist avoids this internal work because it requires confronting vulnerability and limitation. Instead, they reach outward, using others as proof that they still matter. Sleeping with almost anybody becomes a way to preserve the fantasy and avoid facing the fear that without admiration, there is nothing stable underneath. This also explains why narcissists may lose interest quickly after sex. Once the sense of dominance has been re-established, the emotional significance of the other person declines sharply. The encounter has already accomplished its function. What remains would demand mutual presence and emotional depth, which offers no immediate advantage in terms of power. Jung believed that when relationships are used to regulate self-worth rather than share life, they cannot sustain lasting meaning. The narcissist moves on not necessarily because of boredom, but because the illusion of control must be recreated elsewhere. In the end, sexual dominance does not resolve internal powerlessness. It merely disguises it for a brief moment before the cycle begins again. It conceals it. Each encounter delays the moment when the narcissist must confront their own fragility. Jung would argue that authentic strength begins when a person no longer feels compelled to prove it. Until that shift occurs, the narcissist continues seeking control through other people, mistaking temporary dominance for real power and confusing conquest with genuine confidence. True intimacy requires something narcissists experience as deeply threatening: the willingness to be seen as they truly are. Carl Jung believed that intimacy is not merely physical proximity, but psychological presence. It involves revealing fears, doubts, and imperfections, and allowing another person to encounter the unpolished self. For narcissists, this level of exposure feels unsafe. Their identity is carefully constructed around an idealized image, and intimacy threatens to fracture that image. When someone gets too close, the risk of being truly known increases. Along with that risk comes the fear of rejection, shame, and loss of control. This is why narcissists often appear to crave closeness, yet withdraw when it becomes emotionally authentic. Casual or excessive sexual encounters offer a subtle psychological compromise. They allow physical closeness without emotional vulnerability. Sex creates the illusion of intimacy while preserving emotional distance. Jung might describe this as a split between body and psyche, where physical acts substitute for emotional presence. The narcissist can experience connection without revealing their inner world. There is touch without transparency, desire without disclosure. This form of closeness feels safer because it includes an exit mechanism. The moment the interaction begins to require emotional honesty, the narcissist can retreat, detach, or move on. This pattern is not random. It functions as a protective strategy. Narcissists fear that if someone truly sees them, they will be exposed as inadequate. Their sense of self is too fragile to tolerate that possibility. Jung emphasized that individuals often defend against their deepest fears by controlling the conditions of engagement. In this situation, the narcissist manages intimacy by limiting it to contexts where vulnerability is unnecessary. Sexual encounters become structured experiences in which they can perform desire without surrendering emotional power. True intimacy also demands mutual dependence, and that dependence can feel suffocating to a narcissist. It introduces the possibility of being influenced by another person, of needing them, and of being hurt. To avoid this risk, narcissists prefer connections that feel intense yet shallow. Sex provides intensity without obligation. It enables them to feel desired while remaining emotionally unattached. The closeness is physical, but psychologically, a barrier remains firmly intact. Jung believed that psychological maturity involves tolerating emotional uncertainty. Narcissists struggle with that tolerance. They want the rewards of intimacy without accepting its risks. Casual sexual relationships offer a way to experience warmth, attention, and proximity without confronting the discomfort of emotional exposure. The other person may interpret the encounter as meaningful or hopeful. For the narcissist, however, the meaning often ends where vulnerability begins. This imbalance frequently leads to confusion and pain for those involved, who sense closeness yet never reach depth. Over time, this avoidance of authentic intimacy reinforces emotional isolation. The narcissist may be surrounded by people, experiences, and physical connections, yet feel profoundly alone. Jung warned that avoiding the inner self leads to repetition rather than growth. Each sexual encounter replaces the last, but none lead to deeper connection or genuine self-understanding. The narcissist remains emotionally static, protected, yet unfulfilled. What makes this dynamic especially tragic is that the narcissist often longs for connection even while fearing it. Their avoidance is not an absence of desire for closeness, but a limited capacity to tolerate it. Intimacy requires humility, empathy, and emotional risk. These qualities threaten the narcissist's carefully curated self-image. Rather than risk exposure, they choose relationships that can be ended without lasting emotional consequence. The exit option becomes essential. Jung believed that real healing occurs when a person dares to remain present in discomfort instead of escaping it. For the narcissist, this would mean staying emotionally engaged even when insecurity surfaces. Until that shift happens, sex remains a substitute for intimacy rather than an expression of it. Closeness without vulnerability may feel safe, but it never satisfies the deeper human need to be known and accepted. By avoiding authentic intimacy, the narcissist protects the false self, but at the cost of genuine connection and emotional depth. Carl Jung described neurosis as a state in which life loses its deeper meaning. When someone feels disconnected from purpose, values, and authentic identity, an inner emptiness begins to form. For narcissists, this emptiness is not occasional, it is chronic. Beneath the confidence, charm, and self-promotion lies a hollow center that never feels fully content. This void emerges from a lack of true self-connection. Because the narcissist's identity is built around image rather than inner truth, lasting fulfillment remains out of reach. Sex enters this psychological terrain as a temporary remedy, offering a brief illusion of completeness that quickly dissolves. In the moment of sexual attention or desire, the narcissist feels briefly alive. The emptiness quiets. There is a sensation of being wanted, selected, and significant. Jung might describe this as a symbolic attempt to reclaim meaning through sensation. The body becomes a shortcut to feeling real when the inner world feels barren. Yet because this experience does not arise from internal alignment or self-awareness, it cannot endure. The pleasure fades, the attention ends, and the void resurfaces, often deeper than before. This is where the cycle reactivates. Instead of exploring the emptiness or questioning its source, the narcissist attempts to mute it. Sex becomes a way to avoid confronting the deeper loss of meaning. Each new encounter promises relief, a fresh distraction, a renewed sense of importance. At the same time, each encounter reinforces dependency. The narcissist learns that emptiness can be postponed through stimulation, but never resolved by it. Jung warned that when meaning is absent, individuals chase intensity. The narcissist confuses intensity with fulfillment, mistaking temporary excitement for genuine purpose. The compulsive quality of this pattern is frequently misunderstood. It is not driven by overwhelming desire, but by desperation. The narcissist is not pursuing pleasure for its own sake. They are attempting to escape an internal silence that feels intolerable. Sex fills that silence briefly, like noise filling a quiet space. But when the noise stops, the silence feels louder. This fuels the urge to repeat the behavior, to seek the next body, the next validation, the next fleeting sense of wholeness. Jung believed that meaning cannot be imported from the outside. It must be cultivated inwardly through reflection, responsibility, and integration of the psyche. The narcissist avoids this internal labor because it demands confronting painful truths, including inadequacy and emotional dependency. Instead, they pursue experiences offering immediate gratification. Sexual encounters become rituals of temporary completeness, even though they never satisfy the deeper hunger. Over time, the cycle intensifies the emptiness rather than easing it. The narcissist may accumulate partners and experiences, yet feel progressively more disconnected. What once provided relief begins to feel mechanical. The illusion of fullness becomes increasingly difficult to maintain, requiring more frequent or heightened stimulation. Jung would interpret this as neurosis deepening, not resolving. The psyche signals that something essential is absent, yet the narcissist continues responding with distraction instead of insight. From a psychological perspective, the pattern feels tragic. The narcissist is not incapable of meaning, but estranged from it. Their energy is devoted to preserving appearances rather than cultivating inner life. Sex becomes a substitute for purpose, closeness, a substitute for connection, sensation, a substitute for significance. Each encounter postpones the confrontation with emptiness while guaranteeing its return. Jung believed healing begins when a person turns toward the void rather than fleeing from it. Emptiness is not the enemy, it is a signal. It points toward the need for authenticity, depth, and self-understanding. Until that message is acknowledged, the narcissist remains caught in repetition, mistaking temporary fullness for lasting fulfillment. The cycle persists not because sex fails, but because it was never designed to provide what the narcissist is truly lacking: a meaningful relationship with the self, and a grounded connection to their own inner world.